A Man Who Lived in 3 Centuries. My Memoir by Diana Wood. He walked towards us with measured steps, his dog next to him. In his right hand was a machete. For a brief moment our eyes met, and I sensed an uncomfortable feeling from him. Right away he looked at my husband, without acknowledging me being there. There were questions and answers between them. After some time I lost interest and thought that I might as well play with the dog, when I asked, "Excuse me, Frank, what's your dog's name?" He looked surprised, as if he just noticed that I was speaking. He leaned towards me with his ear cupped, but he was looking at my husband with a puzzled expression. I thought, did he think I was speaking Chinese? My husband repeated what I said. When he looked down at the large black lab and said, "Tippy," when I stretched my arm ready to pat the dog, with a lightning speed he whipped his arm in front of me and said, "If I were you, I wouldn't do it. He's not used to strangers. He might just snap at you." I gave an embarrassed smile and returned to observe this old man, who was shorter than me, but his confidence was registered on his body. He stood tall and solid, spoke slowly and quietly. I was told that he was in his 70s. After a while, he asked if we wanted to tour on his 73-acre waterfront property. More than happily, we said yes, and immediately we followed him towards a row of large Chinese chestnut trees, which ran east towards the mountain and west towards Humming Bay Cove. A small tree house sat on one of the trees, but I had no chance to check it out. Instead, hurriedly we followed them. Behind the chestnut trees was a thick patch of saw ferns, and on the other side of the ferns was a dark forest, with light filtering through the large, tall fir trees. I could see the clean forest floor covered with a thick layer of brown needles, soft and spongy. The atmosphere among the giant trees was silent. We whispered to each other, as if sound would destroy the sacredness of this place. When we came out of the forest, the sun was shining on the path direct across from us. On the other side of the path was a slough. The smell of salt and fishy ocean permeated the air. The black soil in the slough was covered with lush green vegetation. At its center, a crystal-clear shallow stream was flowing to the sea leisurely. We stood watching for a while, then Frank suggested that we continue the tour. We arrived at a deciduous forest, the sun above flickering through the tall maples and alders, washed over a sea of saw ferns below. I closed my eyes for a second, imagined laying on top, and felt the softness wave on my back. Tippy led the way on the meandering path, which was very clean and smooth. After walking for a while, Frank turned around and said, "This was an evergreen forest before logging. Afterwards, alders and maples took over. They provided a perfect environment for the ferns to grow." We continued on this trail, and gradually I heard the faint sound of running water. We followed it until we came upon a trail hidden between the thick wall of salmonberry shrubs. Immediately Frank whacked off the intruding branches with his machete. The creek was revealed. The water was crystal clean. It made me thirsty. Looking at the creek in front of us, Frank said, "This is a salmon creek. I'm expecting about 20,000 of them to return from the ocean this fall." Hearing this, I was shocked and said, "So many salmon in this small creek?" He looked at my husband again for the translation and continued. 25 years ago, after I'd been digging to release the trapped salmon fry under the debris of sand and gravel from this log, the returning salmon increased from about 500 to 25,000 last year. He said this with a satisfied smile. At the end of the tour, seeing our enchanted faces, Frank said, "Are you thinking of renting the yellow house? As I know, there are several people wanting to live there. If If you give me your address, I can write you as soon as I know that the present renter's departure date. Previously, we had planned to live in Taiwan for a couple of years, but 2 months later, we received Frank's mail. My husband left Taiwan immediately, and I stayed 1 extra month with my family and friends, and arrived at the Yellow House on Christmas Eve in 1970. Spring the following year, I couldn't wait to practice what I had learned from horticulture, and soon my mother-in-law bought me a Troy-built rototiller. Ambitiously, I started out on 1/4 acre of land. Then she bought me a pressure cooker and food dryer. With extra food, I traded for fish, for getting land tilled, for getting my old car fixed, and later even traded for babysitting by a neighbor on night side to teach in town. 14 years went by quickly. It was time for my son to go to high school. Then we left for town. During all this time, Frank had been a very good neighbor and friend to me, and of course, eventually, he knew I could speak English. Frank was born in 1897. When he was 93 years old, he moved to town and lived in a rental house. One day when I visited him, I saw that he was splitting wood, as usual, effortlessly, like he was splitting a watermelon. He always insisted on burning wood for heat. At his 100th birthday party, he boasted that he would live in 3 centuries. He passed away in 2003 at the age of 106. His confidence had never failed him.